I don't know why that happened, and I'm not going to talk about it.
Don't worry, I will.
It was.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to episode 1 of the Katsu Cast, inaugural episode. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mom and Dad. I'm just kidding. They wouldn't even listen to this. They don't give a shit. Episode 1, Katsu Cast. My name is Kent, also known as Katsu Style. With me is my co-host, my dear friend and my mortal enemy, Will. AKA. Also known as Furamoda.
Yeah, that's it. That's me, plain and simple.
So this is Katsu Cast. This is a music podcast where we talk about electronic music production, and really generally anything that we feel like talking about, because it's our show and we can do whatever the fuck we want with it. So yeah,
and we love music. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I guess we probably should.
But
before we go into that, I want to sort of give like introduction, since this is the first episode. I want people to kind of know who we are and where we come from, and what our credentials are, specifically because like we are vastly underqualified to talk about this. And I want everyone to know why we are so underqualified. So I guess if you wanna start, I want to know like where you come from and your approach to music and what you do.
All right, so currently I'm into electronic music. I started off in the orchestra. I played viola in middle school.
I only just found this out. Like, we've known each other for a few years. I think I only just realized this like a couple weeks ago when you offhandedly mentioned it.
Yeah, because it's been a long time, and I don't currently count that as like a qualifier when I talk about music. It's just something that I used to do. I mean, it was the beginning, I suppose, but yeah, I did that for several years. Youth orchestra. That was my introduction into playing music, reading music, just understanding it on a deeper level than simply listening to it. That all changed when I discovered a little program called MTV Music Generator.
What the fuck is that?
Yes.
I'm sitting here staring at FLS, expecting you to mention that.
No, not at all. I had never heard of this program until I saw it in the store. And it was really on a whim. I was probably 14, 15 at the time. And I remember just looking at it and thinking, hey, I like music. You can make music on the computer now. This is pretty cool. Let me check this out. So I got that program, and that was my first, what you could say, exploration into electronic music production.
So I'm gonna take a jab and guess that was like, it had like prepackaged like loops you could like drop in.
Yeah. A lot of loops. The sequencing, I can barely remember it now, but it was rough.
Yeah. Primitive.
Yes, very primitive. There were a lot of loops. I remember using a lot of loops, but you could program. I mean, they had samples you could program.
Yeah.
You could sequence some drum loops or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
But I used that for probably a good 2 years until I got FL Studio. So now at this point, I'm around 16. And that was like the end all for me. FL. I mean, the music generator software opened up my eyes to a whole new world of music. And I thought to myself, hey, I don't have to rosin my bow anymore. I could just go on here and make some tracks, and that was crazy to me. The amount of sounds that you can just create on the fly, like you didn't need, to go to a theater to have an orchestra. You have an orchestra at your fingertips. It amazed me. And then after FL, streamlined everything, made everything so much easier, so much more advanced control in FL. I fell in love with that, and I've been using that. I still use that to this day. I mean, we're recording this right now.
Yeah.
NFL. I've used other things since. Machine is my workhorse for creating sounds, and then FL is my glue. Like, that's what I go in to mix things with, put them together.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by your process, because it's just so foreign to me. Even though we both use like digital audio workstations, your entire approach is different from what I'm used to.
Yeah, it's the same way. That's how I feel when I see you with Ableton. I'm looking at you doing this, and I'm like, what's happening? But yeah, that's where I'm at now. I'm a big Native Instruments fan, big Machine fan.
Your goals are also sort of different. Like we sort of exist on different sides of the coin, so to speak.
I don't even know if we're on the same coin.
Besides the fact that we use a DAW and make these weird sounds.
Yeah.
No, because your focus is on like video game music, isn't it?
That's my goal, man. I love the video game soundtracks. I love scores in general, whether it be film, video game, whatever. I just love the fact that you can apply music to something larger than the music itself. That's really why I want to apply. That's what I want to do. I want my music to be applied to something bigger than just music for the sake of music. And I was thinking about film, but I'm not a big film buff like you are. However, video games. I love video games. I love the music of video games. Mick Gordon is like one of my idols. Yeah. Right, Gustavo Santaolalla. I hope I said that right.
He's listening right now. He's gonna be pissed.
I really hope I said that right. I apologize if I didn't. Last of Us soundtrack he composed, which is beautiful. Okay. And then of course my favorite soundtrack from Mick Gordon is Prey, which is one of my favorite games. But when you apply this to something else, it just adds to it and it multiplies.
Yeah.
And that's what I would like to do. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. My qualifications are: one time I DJ'd piss drunk when I was 23. All right, so okay. So it's funny you mentioned the MTV music generator thing. So although I was taken aback, I kind of come from a similar background. So I played piano. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, like young kid. Didn't really go anywhere with it. I'm shit at reading music. I didn't take it that seriously, I guess, when I was a kid, and I kind of wish I had. So for all you kids out there listening,
study your music.
Take it seriously. So no, I probably around the same time that you picked up your copy of MTV, whatever the fuck it was, I picked up a copy of, it was a freeware at the time called Magic's Music Maker.
I've had that too. Yes.
Magic spelled with an X.
Yes.
Magic's Music Maker.
I've used that too.
Yeah, in my early days of doing video stuff, I would do all my sound in Magic's Music Maker. I remember it had a bunch of pre-assembled loops you could drag and drop. I don't even know if there's a tempo control. I guess I would imagine you'd be able to set your own tempo. I don't know. But they were all prepackaged audio samples. You just little 4-bar loops and you just drop them in.
Yep.
And then I remember the effects specifically. They all had presets. So the compressor, there was low, medium, high. That was it. You couldn't change threshold. I didn't even know what a fucking compressor was. I was oh, there's a thing called a compressor. I'm just gonna drop it on there. Of
course.
I had no idea. But that's where I guess that was my first foray into digital music production. They also had another one. It was Magic's Music Maker for PS2.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember something like that on PS2. Yeah.
So I think I picked it up at a GameStop or something, and you can it's a disc. You put it in your fucking PS2, and you can see your DAW layout on PS2.
That's crazy.
Drop in your same fucking loops, and that was my first sort of step into it.
I forgot all about that. I have an example of that. When I had that, I had a neighbor who was younger than me, but he was into the same music.
Yeah.
I brought it over to his house because I worked on a remix on it, and I played it for him at his house. And he was like, "That was your remix?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said it sucked. He was like, "That was garbage. Why'd you do that?" And I felt so bad. I just unplugged it and took it home and cried.
And then you never made anything else again until now.
Yeah.
I also remember Mike Shinoda was doing Fort Minor at the time. I think he had just started that, and I think his song it was Remember the Name, I think was a song. It had this little string loop in it, and I have always adored string orchestration and instrumentation. And he was talking about how he just had used a little string loop throughout the song, and I was like, that's so cool. I didn't really know what it meant, but I was like, I want to do that. So fast forward, I'm using Ableton. That's what I officially started on back in 2012, when everybody else started producing, which was the golden summer of dubstep, 2012. That's when I started. I've always had an interest in electronic music, though. Since I was a kid, my favorite soundtrack was the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, which was chock full of that's where I think a lot of my taste in music came from, the heavier, the metalcore, the industrial rock that was on there, the industrial electronic music, the trancey sort of goofy techno stuff that was there. That's where like I got a lot of my early sort of influences. But yeah, so I work in Ableton. I've been producing for like the last 7 years. Didn't get really serious with it until like the last like 3 years. And I think even you've probably seen a lot of my progression just in the short time that we've known each other, from how I approached production back then to what's coming out now. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I had a side project for a little while called Cyberdyne Fury, and that was my synthwave project.
I like that.
Yeah, that was short-lived. I kind of stopped managing that. It's still up though. You can go check it out. SoundCloud.com/Cyberdyne Fury, I'm pretty sure is the URL. One of the cooler things that happened from that was I got featured on a compilation album that was sold for charity. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you this actually. I just found this out like last week. Somebody put that song that was on that I made for that album. Somebody put that into like a little synthwave mix.
No way.
Yeah, and this was like recent. This was like I think like the end of last year is when that happened.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was I don't know why I did this. I think I had just searched. I was searching on Google Play Music. I was like, I wonder if this compilation album is on Google Play Music, if they ever put it there. And I was like, I don't think they did, but I just checked. So I typed in my name, Cyberdyne Fury, and it didn't come up with anything, but it came up with like YouTube results, and I saw where I knew like somebody that had posted it. Mm-hmm. I saw another post that I think was my own post, and then I saw another one, and I was like, what is this? So I went on YouTube and I pulled it up, started playing it. It was a fucking synthwave mix with my song in it.
Yeah.
I forget who uploaded it, but whoever you are, thank you. I guess I'll link it in the description. But yeah, I was like, I've never heard anything I've made in a mix before. I was like, this is so weird. It was so cool though.
Yeah. That something like that happened to me before. Back when this was years ago. I used to be a member of Newgrounds. I don't know if you're familiar with that community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I used to go on there, play Flash games in high school and whatnot. But it's actually pretty cool where you go on there and
we're immediately dating ourselves right now.
We
too.
are, for sure.
Even though we gave specific years as to when we started.
Did
we're also
I didn't.
Well, I guess
years ago.
Yeah. Well,
30 years ago.
Well, I think if you talk about MTV like Music Generator, then some kid is probably like, "What the fuck is that?"
Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, I used to go on there and I would upload music to Newgrounds,
and then I would shit post it.
probably. But yeah, I remember it was a while after I had some things posted. I just Googled. Kind of like what you did. You searched your name on Google Music. I just used Google though, like big Google.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's just see. But yeah, it came up with the YouTube link, and someone had, because the old tracks at the time were available for download.
Yeah.
And someone had picked one of my tracks for a compilation video they put on YouTube for, I think it was like Super Smash Brothers Melee or something.
Yeah.
Man. Like they were just like showcasing like some stuff they were doing, and one of my tracks was in there. And I was like, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So whoever did that, thanks.
Do you remember, this is not your genre of music, but he was also on Newgrounds. There was a producer named DJ Nate.
Not familiar.
Oh, I loved his stuff. It was like all like this like trancey like rave music.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. DJ Nate, if you're out there, call me. I think I still have his stuff on a hard drive somewhere, like this low quality, like 128K, like just like shitty quality stuff. But like the music was good. It's just the quality of the files I have is garbage.
Right. Yeah.
But oh man, that stuff is so good. So good.
LimeWire.
Yeah. I'll put it back. I'm bringing LimeWire back. I'm gonna declare. Yeah. I'm gonna bring it back. I'm gonna post his music on there.
Compressed 30 times over.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, that's where we come from. That's us. And I noticed that you had described. You didn't say this. This was going to be my segue. Is that you were going to be like, I'm a composer or whatever you say, and I'd be like, oh, I noticed earlier since you said this, but you didn't, so I don't have a segue into our actual topic. Which our actual topic is what's in a name. You know, like what do we, because we talked about this a couple weeks ago, we talked about this, because you have a specific term that you call yourself whenever you describe what you do to people. Likewise, I hadn't really thought of it, but I was like, yeah, I guess I have a certain way of describing it as well, although I don't think my description is as concise as yours. But we'll get into that, because that is kind of, I don't know if it gets talked about a whole lot, and it might just be like our extremely small circle of who we interact with about this sort of stuff. But I feel like this isn't a general sort of topic, and certainly I didn't give it a whole lot of thought when we had talked about it that first time. But it's like, yeah, there's like a billion different names for what we do. A lot of people don't know. A lot of people use them interchangeably. They don't know, like, the difference from one to the other. And, yeah, it's just sort of a weird thing that I hadn't really thought about. So I thought maybe we could spur some sort of thoughtful discussion about that.
I hope so, because there's a lot. So. I mean, if you're doing something how we're doing it, which I feel like a lot of people are doing it, is on their own.
Yeah.
You know, as an entrepreneur, that's really what you have to think of yourself.
Exactly.
Because you are, when you're marketing your music or whatever it is you're doing, if you're doing it on your own, you are your own business. And as in any business, there's going to be a title of some sort. So you might as well make it something that you like, you know, that you are proud of. And that's what got me thinking about what titles are used these days, what they all mean, if there's any difference to them, and what I personally use. So
yeah, but it's not even just like, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, like how you pitch it to other people. It's also like it disseminates down into just our everyday, how we describe ourselves to like friends or acquaintances or, hot chicks.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the context with which we had started talking about that. But yeah, so what do you call yourself? Because you were very specific about this.
Yeah, these days I've come to like the term composer.
Okay, so I was right when I said composer.
Yeah.
So that's what I thought I had remembered that you had said.
And I don't want to offend anyone who, may still write sheet music with a quill pen on parchment. No offense there. No, the reason why I like that term is because I think it just succinctly describes someone who creates melodies, arrangements, harmonies, songs, if you will, from scratch. They do it. They come up with the chord progressions, the keys, the scales. I mean, that's what a composer does. I mean, the technology has changed, obviously, these days. You don't have to even have, actual sheet music these days. I mean, if you want a band to play it, yeah. But with, the advent of samplers like Contact, where I can load up an entire grand piano, take my MIDI keyboard, record something, play it, arrange it, edit, and then export it as a wave, as a whole solo piano piece without even considering what the actual, sheet music would look like.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's just a natural progression of the technology that we have these days of music. So the term composer for me, it sounds kind of old school when you hear it. It sounds, a little uppity maybe. I don't know. But I just think it accurately describes what I do. It's create songs from scratch. Now, when I first started with FL, I was big into hip hop and rap. That was a lot of sampling. I wouldn't consider that composing. You can compose things on top of it. You can have background bass and synth and everything like that. But for me, like ripping like a Isley Brothers sample off of a record, it's not less of a music. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But the title, I feel like, is different. At that point, I would say something like producer or beatmaker, which I've never personally liked.
Yeah.
Beatmaker. I mean, people use it all the time, and if you like it, when it boils down to it, if you like it, use it.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're all individual people, individual businesses, so it's really personal preference. But for me, Beatmaker, I felt like I out-welcomed my stay with that when I started, well, I guess composing is what I would say. When I started to depend less on samples and more on creating something original, I felt like Beatmaker wasn't really accurate for what I was doing.
Right.
So then I just decided composer was, I don't know, I felt like I was lived up to that definition.
I feel like that also feeds into like what your aspirations are, because like, I mean, you think about like people who write scores, they're like score composers. You look at like a video game score or a movie score, it says composed by.
Yes.
So I think that also sort of feeds into that whole mentality that you have
It
as
does
far as
for
like
sure.
what you want to do.
I think I actually narrowed down that title once I decided or came to the realization that that's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, that's a composer then. Oh yeah, I want to be that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I am. Yeah, I'm that.
How do other people like respond to that? Like you tell people, like, say you're in a conversation with someone you don't know that well, you're getting acquainted, and you tell them that you're a composer. I think the natural sort of response to that is, like, I mean, you mentioned it jokingly, but I think the natural response is like, oh, like, you write sheet music and tablature,
Yeah.
or they might even confuse a conductor with a composer, and they're like, oh,
True.
you work with an orchestra, like,
Yeah.
So like, I think there's, for any of us, there's always this follow up, like, like, oh, I'm this, which means I do blah, blah, blah. So, like, when you tell people, like, I'm a composer, like, I would assume that there's some sort of follow-up with that.
There's usually questions of trying to narrow it down because I think a lot of these terms have some level of ambiguity in them, and it's like, well, what does that really mean?
Right.
But I feel like for the most part, if I say composer, like, oh, so you make music? And I'm like, yeah. And that's pretty much it. Now, when I used to say just musician, I got a different response. I got, what instrument do you play?
You don't get that with composer?
No.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. I mean, I need to test it on maybe like a bigger population of people, and I'll get back with you and see
But
what
we
results
don't
I get.
talk to people.
We don't talk to people. Yeah, but when I used to say musician, the majority of the time the response to that was, what instrument do you play?
Yeah. See, that's what I get.
Yeah, and then I'd feel kind of awkward because I'm like, oh, well, it's a beat machine. And then you might have some people that, discredit you.
Yeah.
Say, well, that's not an instrument. And they're like, well, I mean, it makes sounds.
Right.
Like, no, that's not a real instrument.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. Like, we can, I think
it's
that's
a
a
whole
topic.
other-
I
whole
think
other
we'll get
topic.
into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, usually musician was followed up by, what instrument do you play? Composer is just really like, oh, okay. Or like you might say like, what kind of music maybe?
Yeah.
But usually it's just like, oh, yeah.
If you ever get, well, I guess, like, if someone was like, oh, well, like, what kind of music do you compose? I guess how do you follow that up?
See, that's the question. That's the tougher question.
Because,
for me.
like, because I'm imagining that you'd be like, oh, I'm a composer, and they're like, what kind of music do you make? And then your answer, whatever it might be, like, oh, I make electronic music, or I make lo-fi. Then they'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
You're not a real composer.
Yeah,
so, like,
yeah.
you and I have trouble with generic sort of labels.
Well,
so.
we have. I think what we have trouble is narrowing down what genre that we think we belong in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's why that question is difficult for me to answer, because usually when someone asks me what genre,
Right.
I have to explain to them that I don't know. It usually ends up being me telling them, electronic, I guess, is the very vague umbrella term you can use, simply because it's made electronically.
Right.
But if you were to listen to my SoundCloud, you might start off with what you can consider like down tempo, maybe ambient, but then the next song could be this solo piano piece, and then the next song is like this post rock vibe
With like hip hop drums in the background.
So you're like, what is this? And if you ask me what it is, I don't know either.
Yeah.
I mean, I usually tell people it depends on the day.
Yeah.
Because it really does. I don't really have an idea of a genre when I sit down and make music. I just like making music.
Right.
So one day I think I have one on there, Rosita, that's a very island style. The drums are very, it's very Caribbean.
Yeah.
And that's like the first of its kind I've made, but just, that day I was just inspired to do that. So I don't really have one genre. One thing I have been trying to narrow down is a specific sound. I don't know what that is. That's your heartbeat. I think that's your heartbeat.
We just had a blip in the audio signal, and it came through visually as what looked like a reading from an EKG. So
That's awesome, yeah. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
What was I saying? Yeah, I was trying to narrow down a sound, and I came up with a subgenre name that I like.
Oh God.
It's called electro space funk.
Oh, you have told me this. Yeah.
I like that. I don't know why. It's funky. It's goofy. But like, I feel like if you hear that, you're like, you can already kind of imagine what that would sound like. I mean, spacey. Okay.
Yeah.
Electro. So you get some basics, like you think of the drums or you think of the synths. And then, space, okay, maybe like some reverb drenched or like
Yeah.
ambient sounds. And then funk, okay, well, you got a good beat to it, got a good bass line. And I feel like the ones that I call that pretty much fit that description pretty well.
Except for that, like when we talk to the layman who doesn't listen to any subgenre of electronic music, you'd be like, I make electro space funk.
That
And
doesn't
like,
work.
this guy's fucking crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's not transferable. That's why I usually have to give them the vague,
Electronic.
composer of what electronic. Okay.
Yeah.
What does this sound like? Well,
Then we get back into the whole fucking.
like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah.
You'll find out, I guess.
Do you think after releasing this episode, BuzzFeed's gonna pick up an article on us? It's like Furamoda is appropriating Caribbean culture with his one song.
I hope they do. Yeah.
We're gonna go through the roof with that.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
It's gonna be great.
BuzzFeed, call me. Yeah. So
So, what do you call yourself?
since I haven't given it as much thought, I just call myself. I used to call myself. Well, I used to DJ, so that's why, like, back in the day, that's what I sort of went by, and I didn't really care for that because, I got more into production. So now I just call myself a producer, / musician. I think I really have to, like, sit and think about it because this is not something I give a whole lot of thought to just in general. So I guess, like, most of the time when I'm speaking with, the layperson, then I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm a musician. Which is immediately followed up with, what do you play?
Yeah.
Which gets back into what we just talked about, but it's like, if I call myself a producer, then it's like, well, like I write music and I put it together and, I do that whole thing. But then I just get like an off look from a person. It's like, well, what does that mean? So I think like, like a songwriter immediately conjures up images of like, some dickweed with an acoustic guitar. For all the people who play acoustic guitar, I'm not calling you a dickweed, but there's this very specific image that conjures up this very
Sure, yeah.
Archetypal, the smoky sort of hipster bar and the fucking acoustic guitar, and they'd sing some sappy hipster song or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, but if I say that I'm a musician, it's like, well, what do you play? And I do, like, I play a few instruments. I wouldn't say I'm very proficient at any one particular instrument. Like, I grew up playing piano, but I can't just sit down and, like, jam behind a piano. I play guitar, but, like, the scope of my guitar playing is, like, shitty metalcore covers. So, and then, I guess the instrument I'm most comfortable behind is, like, drums. But, like, I can't, like, I don't know specific rudiments. Like, I couldn't tell you, like, like, different techniques or theory behind drums. I just like, a lot of it actually falls back into the category of shitty metalcore covers, like, because they're just fun to play. But I can, to some extent, I can sort of jam. Like, if you give me a pair of sticks and you sit me down behind a kit, I can kind of like jam around a little bit. But that's one of the things that appeals to me about what it is that we do is what you touched on earlier, is like having this world of sound just at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And like this is probably going to irritate some of the more like, crotchety, uppity, old school types, but like I don't have to learn how to play a cello if I want to include cello instrumentation in my music.
No.
That doesn't make it any less of, a skill to have to be, but it takes out that part of the equation that I don't have to understand the rudiments of playing a cello and study it for 10 years for me to be able to incorporate it into my music.
Right.
All that's to say is that, like, yeah, it's like, well, I'm a musician. Oh, what do you play? I produce, I do everything digitally, I do it all on my computer. And then usually people are like, this guy's fucking weird. The conversation ends there. But yeah, it's like, I that's how I would describe it, is that I'm a musician. I put everything together and, I do it all on my computer. And then beyond that, I was like, well, it's a lot of electronic music, a lot of dance music. I hesitate to say EDM, just because it's such a blanket umbrella term that really just describes like whatever electronic music is cool on the radio right now, which is usually like progressive house, future bass right now. I think is sort of the flavor of the month. In 2012, it was dubstep, so it's just like EDM is just this. It doesn't. I don't really feel like it means a whole lot. So yeah, it's like. I just say dance music. Yes, that's really what. And
that's the point of that.
Yeah, and people are gonna think, the layman is gonna think, like, oh yeah, it's just EDM or whatever, that shitty house music that's on the radio. But that's to keep it concise when I'm talking to somebody in public, that's usually just what I keep it to.
Producer.
Yeah, I'm a producer, I'm a musician. I make everything electronically or digitally on my computer. A lot of it's sort of like dance music. I also like orchestral instrumentation.
Yeah.
That's
And
usually...
I think that well explains it. You know, producer is a term that's used very commonly, especially with electronic music. Like usually the person who makes the background, like the beats and stuff, will produce the entire song.
Yeah, I think it comes from that tradition of the production side of it, because we do all of that ourselves, is that we don't just write the arrangement and compose it, we also produce it. So
true.
we have to get in there and, make sure everything sits right in the sort of frequency spectrum, everything is panned appropriately in the stereo field. We have to add compressors, EQ.
I think that's what we were on about when we first brought this topic up.
Yeah, it's like the validity of what it is that we do.
Exactly. It was, how do we define what we do? And like, okay, we make music. Okay, but how? Well, you make it on a DAW or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to know some kind of music theory, or at least if you don't know the theory, you at least have to know what sounds good.
Right.
You have to have an ear for it.
Right.
Otherwise, you just make a noise. I think we're going to have another topic later.
Yeah.
About how you might not even have to have an ear for it.
Right. Exactly.
But we'll talk about that later. But either way, we have to. Number one, you're writing melodies, and then you're writing the harmonies, and then you're arranging that into a song, and then you are possibly recording something. You're mixing something. Maybe you're mastering something. So far, all of those things I've named, in a big label, those are completely different jobs.
Yeah.
By completely different people. That's those are careers. Those are individual careers.
Yeah.
And here we are in our bedroom trying to do all of that. So credit to anyone who is, on the grind like we are, doing this on your own. It's a lot of work. A lot of people don't understand that. People that aren't into music, they just think it's... I've had someone say, oh, you just program beats. And I'm like, dude, no. Even thinking of programming is difficult. So, I don't know. But
you're just missing two different things at once in one statement. What a dickbag.
I've got that before, but it's like, people that aren't into the electronic production side, they don't fully know all what goes into this. It's a lot more difficult than people may believe. Even something that you think as a listener sounds simple could have taken someone a while to come up with that. Yeah. Or to make it sound just right the way you hear it. So I think that's what we were discussing when we say, well, what if we're doing all these things, what do we call ourselves?
Right. Like, what's the purpose of, what do we call ourselves, and what's the purpose of that title that we give
Now, here's an interesting thought. What wouldn't you call yourself? Because I would not call myself an engineer.
Right.
And here's why.
Okay.
I have literature on engineering.
I'm looking at it.
You're looking at the book right there, the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, which is a great handbook for anyone who's interested in the art of mixing, or who wants to get started. Even for people who are already into it, it's a good reference. I recommend looking it up. I got it for Amazon. It might have been like $15 or something, but it taught me a lot. It taught me how to mix, and it also taught me that I'm not a mixing engineer. The reason being, that's another field. Like, that's another aspect of music that I don't personally feel like at this current time I'm going to spend enough time practicing to consider myself that role. Yeah. Composing, that's been the bulk of my music career is composing, so I feel like that's valid. Producer, I feel like that's valid. Engineer, no. I don't. I do it. Do I mix? Sure. Do I mix? Sure. Do I try and make a shitty master? Sure. Am I a mixing or mastering engineer? No, not by a long shot. I wouldn't never call myself that. That's something that I haven't gotten into. Now, I'm sure there's people that do all of those things, and then they can call themselves whatever they want. Yeah. But also, there's the fact that if you just say you're an engineer, I think that also implies that you didn't actually make the music. Right, yeah. You're just working on it. Not to say, again, that engineers aren't musicians, because I'm sure there's plenty of engineers that also make music. Yeah. But if you just say engineer, I feel like that specifically refers to the process of mixing a song or mastering a song, not the writing or the arranging or anything like that.
Traditionally, at least.
Exactly. And then
to.
that's also a thing is tradition is behind a lot of these titles.
Yeah.
And these days, a lot of these titles are becoming, interchangeable. Very few like Beatmaker and producer. I feel like from what I've seen, those are one and the same when people use them. At least.
Yeah.
Beatmaker, producer, I see that interchangeably all the time.
Well, even outside of electronic music, because you hear a lot about, I listen to a lot of like rock and metal and stuff like that. And like going way back, I remember hearing about bands that were producing their own records. Now that was a big deal back in 2004, 2005. Like all these bands, these big bands are producing their own album, and there's like this big crazy thing. So yeah, I think, melding those lines and doing away with sort of these traditional titles is something that permeates throughout pretty much any realm of music. So.
Yeah, and it's probably going to keep changing.
Yeah. I think another thing is that people just don't. A lot of people don't understand these titles, and one of the places I think that's the most apparent is the difference between like a producer and a DJ. So like if you
that's more obvious to us, but to someone else maybe not,
because like you look at like the list of like I forget which publication does it, the mainstream publication that's like top 100 DJs or of the world or whatever the fuck it is, and it lists out 100 fucking the DJs from like least good I guess to the best. I don't know. But like you look at the list, and every single fucking year the top, if you boil it down to the top 10, probably even the top 50, it's always producers that are on there, like Martin Garrix and Skrillex and whoever, like Marshmello. I don't know if he was on there, like just whoever the fuck, And these people are all like, yes, like the way they deliver their music in a live context is usually in the form of a DJ set. They have CDJs or a laptop or God forbid a controller, because people hate those, I guess. I don't know if that's still a thing. I still use a controller, fuck you. But like in the context of their live performances, at the very simplest, usually it's a DJ set.
Yeah.
But does that make them a DJ? Does that mean that they're the world's best DJ? Like there are other people who have studied the art of turntablism and DJing and juggling through beat juggling and all that stuff, and this fucking guy that made a really catchy tune that's on the radio and he's making millions of dollars from it. Good for him. Is number one on the top 100 list of DJs. And I think it just goes to show us that like a lot of, at the very least, like casual consumers of this might not really get the scope of the difference and like what goes into it.
You know what that reminded me of? Comparing what you just said to you said earlier, you don't have to know how to play a cello to incorporate a cello.
Yeah.
So I feel like that list is kind of like, if that list would say like top 100 cellists, is that the term?
I would think so.
And it listed like people that have made cello music from a DAW. Would that count? I don't think it would.
Interesting.
Because then you're not a cellist. You're using the cello.
Yeah.
But you're not a cellist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that. But like it's also weird because like you can to what extent can you emulate that? Because like I use East West Orchestra, like their Play VST, and I use like the Hollywood Strings, and there's so many different articulations. Like you could, if you know what you're doing, you could emulate an entire orchestral performance with a billion layers, but like each layer doing different articulations on the same sort of instrument. So it's like, to what extent can you emulate that? And yeah, I guess to what extent could you call yourself a cellist? Like I'm prone to agree with your statement. Like, yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily call that, like if you had made this cellist composition digitally, then yeah, I don't know if I'd sort of hesitate, like, yeah, like you're a cellist, because there's a physicality to it.
Yeah.
That you don't get.
Because that's an actual instrument.
Exactly.
And unless you're using the actual physical instrument.
Yeah. And the physical movements to incorporate these different sounds and techniques. Yeah. Like you can emulate it, but
you could call yourself a composer. You can call yourself a producer, but I wouldn't say you're a cellist.
It's also not to say that you could like push keys on a keyboard and fully comprehend, how to use a cello. I think like this took me a while to figure out. Like I always loved strings, and I would just sort of throw them in just wherever, just willy-nilly. Yeah. And looking back on my old project files, I would see this. Like you still have to understand, like for example, if you're writing with a cello in an electronic dance track, then like you need it would help if you understand how the cello functions in an orchestra
Right.
or how it functions in a string quartet. What's the frequency range in it? You wouldn't put like a top line melody in like C3 or C4 or C5. Sorry, probably like C4 or C5 into a cello. It would probably be a lower octave.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't understand that, then you'll just throw like, you know, an entire like chord progression on top of a melody with a bass line into a cello, and it's probably going to sound muddy as shit, and it's just the melody isn't going to ring out, and it would just sound weird. So like you still need to understand like what the purpose of these different tangible actual instruments are in a composition to know how they work and to know where they work best.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would agree. I don't think that if you made an entire piece on a cello and you produced it in a DAW, but you never once like actually picked up a cello, then I don't know that that person would necessarily be a cellist. They would still be a composer, a producer, whatever.
But not a cellist.
I don't know that I would call him a cellist.
I'm more, I go for the more classical term on that, and I would say that's not, you know, I doubt anyone's calling themselves that. I do know that there's Zoe Keating, I believe is her name. She's a cellist, and she makes electronic music, but it's with her cello, but she records it in unique ways. Like, she layers it. I think she has an album called Cello Times 16 or something like that. And it's an awesome album, but she actually has played this. So she is a cellist, but she's also an electronic musician.
Right,
It's an interesting combination of things. Well, what about something closer to home? Because you and I both use MIDI keyboards. Do you consider yourself a keyboardist?
Absolutely not, because I'm garbage at it.
Yeah. Like, even when someone asks me what instrument do I play, although I have a keyboard, I never say that. I mean, I say I have a keyboard. You know, I don't say, I play keyboard or I play piano. I never say that because I don't. I mean,
I hesitate to do the same.
I'm fluent enough to record everything you've heard of mine on there. Fine.
It's better than me,
but
I can't even do that.
I wouldn't go and do a live show and just play all my songs on the piano.
Right, yeah.
Like, I wouldn't do that. You know, because there's an element of recording and then going back.
Quantizing.
Yeah. So I, you know, without the aid of things like that, I would not. It wouldn't sound like the recording.
Right.
So I don't call myself a...
Yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
And I think that's a small note when I think of these titles like producer and composer. A small note is, like, to me, that adds a layer of you don't actually have to play an instrument to be either one of those two things. Like, a composer is the writer of the music. Producer is the producer of the music. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean you're an instrumentalist.
Right.
And that's what I like about those two terms, because I don't feel, I mean, I used to be a violist, sure. Like, I was classically trained on that. Am I now? No.
Right.
I've picked up the keyboard. I've picked up guitar. I don't tell anyone I play keyboard or guitar, though.
Right.
Even if I have guitar, even if I record myself playing guitar on a track, it might sound good for that, but I won't say, hey, I play guitar. If someone says, what instrument do you play? I mean, I'll explain it. I'll say, I have guitar and keyboard, and I pick around with it.
Right.
But I wouldn't say I'm a guitarist.
Right.
You know? So that's another title.
I think, just to take this a step further, and this is more just for my own entertainment. So going back to your question earlier, is like, if, you know, if somebody makes a piece on cello and produces it digitally and puts it out, are they a cellist? Let's take it a step further. If a classically trained professional cellist who has a computer with a DAW was sitting there, and he had his mic, and he or she goes to play the cello spontaneously combusts, and then they have to make the piece in a DAW. Okay. And they have to produce the piece in a DAW. Or are they still a cellist?
I don't think they could get the credit for cellist for that song. No, I don't. Like, I mean, if their whole, if that was like say that was the last song on their album.
Okay.
Of like 12 songs, and the other 11 songs were live recorded with him on the cello.
Okay.
In the credits list, it should be stated the first 11
that his cello
composed
exploded.
And no, I mean, maybe, not necessarily, but I feel like it should be credited as performed. The first 11 will be performed by he or she, and the last one I feel like would be arranged.
Okay, yeah.
By he or she.
I can.
Because they didn't actually play it. You know,
right.
Like, credit where credit's due. Like, if you play the instrument live, that I feel like you got to give that a certain distinction.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, he is a cellist, or he or she is a cellist professionally. But if they made a song on a DAW without any live instruments, then the credit for that song, I feel like, would just be composed, arranged.
Yeah.
not performed.
I really hope that we get like some hate mail from someone that's like, I play cello and my cello exploded and I made this song and you're saying I'm not a cellist.
Oh man.
So didn't you say you put this? I might be making this up, but I feel like you said you had posted something about this on Reddit, didn't you? Like, what do you call yourselves?
I did because this was when I was, I guess you could say, trying to find an identity as a musician, I suppose you could say, or a title.
Remind me what subreddit you posted that
on. I'd have to double check for you. Okay. I'm on a couple of them. I can definitely find out and let you know. I could look it up.
I'm not that worried about it.
Right here while I'm talking.
Okay.
Yeah, but
like, how did that go? Because you got
I got several responses on there, and they were all very interesting. It was on the We Are the Music Makers subreddit. I have a follow-up to this, actually, where I asked a different question. But basically the post was, what title do you give yourself? So this is the We Are the Music Makers subreddit. If you're not familiar with it, I recommend it. It's a good community for people who do all kinds of music. It doesn't matter how or what style. Right. And you can just discuss music ideas, theories. Just like we're talking now, it's just a hub for anything. And I asked this title because I was thinking about different titles that people call themselves and whatnot. I got a lot of responses that I'm not sure were entirely genuine. Like some crazy things like, let's see, one of these, like,
some of these are pretty wordy.
Some of these are good, like Lord Protector.
At that point where I think it'd be sustainable.
Yeah, so like Lord Protector.
So, welcome back, everyone. We just had a really terrible blip in our process where it stopped recording, and we just kept fucking talking for like another 15 minutes. So we're gonna replicate that conversation that we've already had.
Well, we were just last talking about when I was on Reddit asking people what titles they used. And I pretty much covered most of that. I got a lot of different responses. Some of them are pretty lengthy. I don't know how genuine all of them were.
Right.
But it just goes to show that. I mean, it varies person to person.
Yeah. But I think, like, that leads directly into, like, how much does locale play into that?
Right.
Because we live in a small town.
Yes.
And we don't have, like, EDC and shit like that coming through here.
No.
Like, there are some big festivals around the area, but they're, like, 5 hours away. So, like, I wonder if, like, in a bigger city, like if you're like in LA or something, if you if you go up to someone and you're like, oh, like, I'm a producer, and they're like, okay, like, is that how it goes, or is that like, do they also have to do the whole like, well, I play this instrument, but I record all my stuff this way, and blah blah blah. Like, I wonder how much that actually would play into it.
Since I haven't had a lot of experience in the bigger cities like that, I don't know how the communities. Right. How they identify each other. I would think, since there's more people, in the population that are involved in music, that people that aren't involved in music would maybe hear those terms more.
That's true.
They should be more accustomed to hearing, so they should be used to it. If somebody says you're a producer or a musician, like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't question it any further than that.
Right.
Because if you go into these big places, I mean, there's all kinds of music coming out of there. So you never really know. So, I mean, somebody could say they're a musician, and then that could mean electronic, it could mean acoustic or whatever. So
or it could mean that they're immediately more dismissive of it because they're all jaded. I'm a producer. Ugh, another one.
Yeah, maybe. I think, like you said, we live in a small place, so maybe that's why people here have more of those questions.
It's more of a novelty.
Yeah, I mean, we are like the 1 in 10,000 people that they know that have said they're into music, maybe. So they don't know, so they're asking, and they only know, like, what do you mean, like, you play an instrument?
Yeah.
They're like, no.
But does that mean there's only two extremes? Like, it's a novelty and they have no idea and they're not going to listen to it, or it's like everyone's jaded and they're still not going to listen to it?
I think that no matter where you go, you will have people that aren't exposed to it.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So anywhere you go, there's going to be some people that just aren't aware of what titles may or may not mean, or whatever, or they may have classical views on what a musician means. So to them, you can only play an instrument if you call yourself a musician, or sing. Yeah. So I don't know. I'd like to know, actually, from other people, like, if you're listening to this, where are you from? What do you do? What do you call yourself?
Right.
How does that conversation go with other people who aren't into music when you say, you're a producer or a composer or musician? I'd like to know that, actually.
Yeah.
Some good insight.
Will's mom, whenever you hear this, let me know.
Well, she is a singer, actually.
Oh, hey, there you go.
She will say that, yeah.
There you go. If anyone like in LA responds to us, my immediate response would be like, why are you listening to this? Click off of this right now. How did you find us? But yeah, no, I think also, I feel like there's a degree of like how popular is that certain thing, like in the sort of like socio-cultural sort of landscape, like like for example, like back in 2012 when everybody was DJing, right? Like before 2012, if you're like, oh, I'm a DJ, they might think like, hip hop, turntablism, or even like a radio DJ.
Yep.
But like in 2012, if you said you're a DJ, there was no fucking doubt in anyone's mind that, oh yeah, you fucking go out to these shitty dive bars and play like dubstep for 3 hours, Yeah. Like, so I wonder if like, there's like that certain element of like how well known, how common is it, how out there is it that, these titles would make more sense to some people.
Yeah, I think trends affect every part of this.
Yeah.
What style of music is being made, what those people call themselves, like I think it permeates through all elements of music, so I have no doubt that they will continue to change.
Right.
Some might, some that maybe are more classical, like for instance, when we're talking about cello, a cellist like that. I don't think the definition of that is going to change.
Right.
I don't think the definition of any particular performance of an instrument is going to change. But these names that don't necessarily mean performing an instrument, they may change.
Right.
Producer, composer, arranger, beat maker.
Right.
I feel like that stuff will continue to change with trends in time. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see like what sort of feedback we get. I want to move on to something that I hope we can, make a regular thing. So I want to do a segment that I would like to call Now Playing, where we talk about just things that we're like what we're listening to, what's catching our attention right now in music. It doesn't even have to be in music. It can really be anything. It doesn't have to be something you're listening to. If you're reading a cool comic book, if I can talk about that, I don't care. It's my show. I'll do whatever the fuck I want.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
So let's talk about that. I don't know if you prepared anything. I've obviously been thinking about this quietly to myself without telling you. So
well, you never told me what we're going to be doing today, so I think it's safe to say
I just kicked in your door with 2 mics and a bag full of cables.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, let me finish my bagel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you listening to now then?
So I've been listening to actually something that's like just outside of the scope of everything we've been talking about. I've been listening to a lot of like pop punk.
Okay.
Like female-led pop punk.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I caught, there's this band called Yours Truly, which I think they're an Australian band. I caught them in an Instagram stories ad of all places. My sound just happened to be turned on and I caught it and I was like, this is pretty fucking catchy. So like I followed their link that was like, find us on, listen to us on these different platforms. And I clicked the link and it was like iTunes, Spotify, and like maybe like YouTube. And you and I are the only people on the fucking planet that use Google Play Music. So I had to leave the ad and then go to Google Play Music and then search for it. And luckily I found it on there, but they have an EP that I've been listening to like on repeat called Afterglow. And it's really like, it's just fun, catchy, pop punk, sort of reminiscent of like, I think of like We Are the In Crowd or what's that other band? Fucking, I forgot the name. I just drew a blank.
I can't help you out. I don't know.
Oh, they're a really popular one. Fuck. I forgot what they're called. Sorry to all the mainstream female-led pop punk bands whose names I forget.
They're not listening.
But I know. But Yours Truly is a really good band. They have, all these songs are good, but they have this song called Circles.
What's inside your head? Can you explain it? We just go in circles. We just go in circles. Don't say you're misled. Even if you missed it. We just go in circles. We just go in circles.
That is very catchy already.
Just super fun, catchy pop punky vibes. I wish they had more albums.
So I was very unfamiliar with that genre
Oh yeah,
but when I heard it, I was expecting something more aggressive.
really?
But that sounds very
Yeah. No, it's like, and that's what it is. It's just like pop punk.
Yeah.
It has that poppy sort of.
I don't know why I
you know.
expected a darker tone, but yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's what I've been listening to. Yeah, it's really fun. They seem to be a less. I mean, they were lesser known to me for sure. But I don't know how big their fan base is. Their YouTube reach seems all right. But they're a really great band. I fully encourage anybody here who's into that sort of thing to check them out.
Definitely.
And I hope yours truly, if you're listening, make more music for me exclusively, please. Yeah. What about you? What are you listening to right now?
My favorite electronic musician, Natureboy Flako.
I feel like you mentioned them to me before.
I
Him,
probably
her,
mentioned
them.
him, yeah.
Okay.
Probably every time I see you. Probably.
You open up with it actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Natureboy Flako. No. Yeah, he is he classifies it as ambient electronic, but his album that just recently released, Theme for a Dream,
That sounds very dreamy.
last year, it is amazing. I mean, his first album that I listened to was Nature Boy, after his namesake. And that was what caught my attention to him. And the second one is it's just as good. It's got a lot of cool electronic sounds, a lot of sweeping, spacey sounds, which is the kind of stuff I like to implement.
Right.
And it just as an album, it flows together. Like, you know, you might have an album that's very heavy, or a song that's very heavy on the drums and the bass, and then it'll just smoothly go into something a little bit more ambient, just instrumentation, and then it just kind of leads into the next mood, and it just seems to flow together very well.
Is it a concept album? Like what you've been listening to, is it a concept album or is it just...
It's, I think you could call it something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, he even set up a website for the album. So
that's
you can
cool.
go on there, and like it plays little clips from the album, and you can it's like a augmented reality experience kind of deal.
Huh.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean the theme for a dream, even as a title, it's kind of abstract.
Yeah.
It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the album art here. It's pretty wacky. It's got like a guy's floating head in a pool with a bunch of, there's like a floating pyramid with stairs going up to nothing.
Yeah.
Like, it's very abstract. It
Yeah.
makes you question everything. But there's a song on here I really like, and it's called Ancient Lands. And here's that. That album, I listened to it on repeat, and his first one, Nature Boy, which is actually a little bit longer than this one, is a lot more acoustic sounding. This is definitely like purely electronic. His first one had a lot of other instruments and guitar and a little bit of him singing in it. He has a beautiful voice. But the first one was great too, but that's what I'm listening to.
I will say that that sounds like exactly like something you would listen to. Like if I heard that just like out and about somewhere, I'd be like, this, like, did Will make this? Like this is something he would absolutely listen to.
Yeah.
If you had shown me that and been like, I made this, I'd been like, yeah, you totally fucking did.
Yeah, you did.
Like, yeah, that's dope.
That's what
cool.
we're listening to. Yeah.
Yep. I guess that about sort of wraps it up. Unless you have anything that you wanna throw in here. This has been a harrowing experience.
It's been a learning experience.
So I had shown up with 2 mics. I'd shown up with a bag full of mics and mic stands and pretty much everything except for XLR cables because I texted you and I said, hey, do you have XLR cables? I only have one. To which you responded,
yes, I do.
One of them is still in the package.
Yeah, and it was.
And we plugged them in and dealt with this buzzing for at least the first like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Before we figured out, I had suggested it might have been a cable somewhere, and
I didn't believe it.
You refused, and then you unplugged one of the cables, and the buzzing stopped. Then we're like, oh, one bad cable. Then you turned on the other input, and then the buzzing came back. Yeah. So we had 2 bad cables. I only had one in my bag, which thankfully I brought, and we've been sharing a mic this whole time.
Yeah.
So this has been, and then we had an issue with the recording stopping because you decided that you wanted to record this at like 96 fucking like
Kilohertz, 32 bit
96K 32-bit fucking Dolby Atmos. And we wound up with a file that was like 2 gigs.
Yeah.
Your taskbar went away. You had a registry violation error.
Windows was trying to stop me. It didn't want that to happen.
So this has been, I was like, oh yeah, Will has books on mixing and mastering. This will be easy. He has an interface. He knows what he's doing. And it has been a shit show. But it all worked out.
We fixed it. We fixed it. That's what counts. That's what I got the book for. To fix things.
The book, by the way, is sitting on top of a mini fridge that's full of natty lights.
That's not true.
It's theater of the mind, Will. Theater of the mind.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that about wraps this one up. I think this is gonna be a fun time.
I had fun.
Many fun episodes to come.
I hope you hear some feedback. I'd like to hear some other people's thoughts.
Me too. So if you enjoyed this, if you know people who would get some use out of this, spread it around. Spread it to your different music production communities. Where can people find us? Where can they find you, Will?
Like my house.
Like your home address. Yeah, give your home address. Do you not want your socials or your Reddit out? Or?
Yeah, I don't have very many social medias. Actually, I only use Instagram and SoundCloud. SoundCloud.com/Furamoda. No, I take that back. SoundCloud.com/Moda Sounds.
That's good
name
branding.
Is Furamoda though.
That's good branding. You make it confusing for people.
Absolutely.
Moda Sounds. And then what's your how do you spell that?
Moda Sounds?
It's MODA, yeah. And
Sounds.
then your and then your Instagram is
Furamoda on
Okay.
Instagram.
So
Furamoda.
yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know what a URL on Instagram is. I don't think they have that. I doubt anyone uses it on a browser. So if you just search Furamoda, I should be the azalea.
Yeah. So that's, and then you can find me. That's at Katsu Style Music. I think that's gonna be. I haven't set up my socials yet. We're recording this ahead of time, so I haven't. It's not. By the time this comes out, everything will be published. But you can find me at Katsu Style Music, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud. I'm all over the socials.
Yeah.
So yeah, send Will dick pics,
Please
and
not.
we'll we'll call it a day. So if you have any suggestions for the show, just let us know.
Yeah, definitely topics or anything you want
yeah.
us to cover. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Or if you want to be featured on the show, we'll even take that.
That'd be dope, actually.
Have some guests or feature your music or whatever you want. So
We'd love to do that. Let us know.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we don't have a sign off catchphrase.
Let's make it right now.
What's our sign off catchphrase?
Later.
But what happened to my mashed potatoes?
Later. I don't know. Do we need a fancy sign off?
We'll find one.
Yeah.
We'll find one. Cut it.